the truth junkie conundrum. This is something that I'm finding myself contemplating, thinking about today, that truth junkie conundrum. And there is fundamentally nothing that I have to criticize about people that express what they feel to be the truth. But it's a conundrum. And here's the problem that I face when I listen to people, when I read things, when I read the facts, when I come across the facts, which often seem to be tied to the truth, and the facts and the truth are manipulated all the time. So the conundrum is this, that fundamentally, if we become attached to this notion of truth, we will have profound doubt about ourselves and how we fit into the scheme of things. And this is why truth, especially in the alternate media, particularly since we've had access to what is understood to be this social media, internet network of instant gratification on every level. I mean, this is extraordinary, the amount of entertainment that you can gain on whatever level you want to be entertained on, from psychopathic sicknesses to enlightened, exalted expressions of the meaning of the universe, the understanding of everythingness. We have now arrived at a point, what I find to be quite disturbing. I suppose many people can be disturbed at different times of if you look through history, whatever that means, relate to the world that they live in at any given time. People want to avoid suffering and pain and all that kind of experience that creates an internal conflict. We want to avoid that at all costs. And I've always thought that if pain and suffering were a teacher, we'd all be brilliant. We'd all be individual, collective geniuses. Well, humankind would be a genius, declared genius. Eternity would embrace humankind as genius if suffering and pain were any teacher for us. It doesn't teach. For whatever reason, we obviously, when we put our finger, we're 5 years old, and we see a flickering flame, and we put our finger into the flame, yeah, you're not going to do it again. It was a teacher. But in the scheme of things, what is curious, even in the sense of punishment, that you think it's a deterrent, but for some reason, to perpetrate misdeeds, punishment is not a deterrent to the misdeeds that are being practiced. This is something we observe through the exposure that we have in this medium now. And my commentary today, my thoughts today are, this is an important issue for me from the point of view that I've always said. I prefer honesty to truth. Truth and facts are manipulated all the time. And this conundrum it creates is a doubt. And doubt is the most devastating, most difficult reality to live within. And I'm not saying that doubt is necessarily a bad thing, but it makes it difficult. The uncertainty is something that, generally speaking, is not embraced into our bosom. I want to be uncertain today. Well, I have to tell you that if you're a creative individual, and especially people that practice an art activity, uncertainty is the norm of being part of something that is going to actually have significance to someone, because you don't want to be told what you already know. And what comes out of uncertainty is sometimes, not always, but sometimes, something you hadn't thought about. To get back to the truth junkie phenomenon that is going on. And people can create incredible mental dysfunction by bringing up things like Fukushima, unleashed 3/11/11, this monster unleashed, as Oppenheimer expressed, now I'm become death, destroyer of worlds, from the Bhagavad Gita, a famous saying by this character called Shiva, an iteration of Krishna, the multi-armed iteration, expressing as a metaphor that there's some real shit kicking going on out there, and a character that stands for this shit kicking is Shiva. And so there is this notion, quite often, I've come across this recently again, it's been there for a while, that the hoaxes, the idea of hoaxes, things that are being, our nature is being undermined by this, this feeling of doubt. If you can create a doubt by expressing truth, you're going to satisfy some aspect of what mission you're on, whether you're on a truth mission or a lie mission or whatever mission that might be. The fundamental point behind creating any story for quite a number of people, as I find in the alternative media, even respectable people that present themselves as truthers, it fundamentally creates a doubt, and it's not the kind of a doubt that strengthens us. It's not the uncertainty, that what I call the uncertainty principle, and the ability to bear the frustration of uncertainty is not the same as doubt. So this conundrum ends up, for me, the truth junkie conundrum is the level of doubt that it creates in us about something that we are convinced about. For example, the Fukushima issue is top and center. It should be top and center of any discussion, of any serious truth seeker. And look around you, how minimal the exposure is on this incredible epic event that occurred. And you have the usual suspects regurgitated. Well, of course, Nuke is a hoax. Galen Windsor, the guy who swam in the fool pools, of course he can swim in the fool pools because there is no radiation, lethal radiation, because it's being contained. It's being contained. But as soon as you release it, and I think Windsor Galen ended up being in his 80s, so he lived a long life, and he was discrediting anyone from coming out and saying, once this stuff is released, it's not really a problem. Look at me, I'm swimming in the fool pool. This is not a fact that I attach myself to, because I've understood through my own research that these elements and isotopes are extremely deadly and lethal. The way Timothy Mousseau has proven in Chernobyl, there is no microbiological activity in this exclusion zone. There may be wolves and other larger predators that move around, or other animals, larger animals that move through, but we don't have any sense of how their reproductive systems are affected anyway. Nukes are a hoax. Oh, what else is a hoax? Well, the idea that Hitler was creating camps to incarcerate all groups, all different peripheral groups, for artists included, and clergy, and Jews, and gypsies, and gays, and the entire litany of disenfranchised people in any society were rounded up and systematically tortured, because that's what they really love to do. And this is something that has been considered a hoax. Oh, it never happened. It never happened. Yeah. So here's the notion behind these. This is just a few examples that it creates doubt. And if you can create a doubt, you actually have an open door. You have an open door. And what I find to be this truth seeker conundrum, and I'm going to reiterate this from a very fundamental personal experience, that the notion of my relationship to you, anyone, is based on something I feel to be integrally, the word I really prefer to use in this is this sense of honesty in a person, is something that actually you're able to transmit. I'm not interested in your truth. I'm interested in your honesty, in the way you come across. how this is being manipulated in a field of fact, the fact out there that is going now. It is on steroids. The attempt to undermine us through our notion of displacing or dismissing that honesty matters. Honesty matters. No, we want legalese. We want lawyers to establish truth and fact. Whereas the fundamental notion of being a human has always been predicated on intent. The intent behind something that we do, if it is based nefariously, it'll create misdeeds. If it's based on an honesty, an integrity, a decency within us, it's going to result in a positive way. It'll have positive results. This is my experience as a human being. I don't give a shit about your facts and your truth. If you're not honest, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Which is why whenever I perceive people telling me stuff, and it's like ratcheted up, you can find anything on any topic, you can come across, you type in anything, you'll get an answer to it. This is phenomenal. So I'm more interested in what I don't actually have an answer to in many ways. I like to live with the uncertainty. I like anything that represents in my life uncertainty that I can build on, that I can create the story that actually makes a difference in some way. I think this was something that occurred to me again this morning. I've talked about this before, and the people that I appreciate most on YouTube are people that emerge out of their shell by recognizing this aspect within themselves, this depth of integrity, not the blah, 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 blah going on all the time, whatever it might be, but this sense of honesty, this feeling that is transmitted. This is not something you can fudge. I know most people that present themselves have some kind of, alternative motive, ulterior motive, a secondary gain, something to present themselves with the idea that you get something out of it. It's a sort of thing I've thought about in terms of my own work, making paintings, that as a painter, I produce something, and as in any activity, I will not stop making paintings because they don't sell. This is something that over the last close to 50 years now, more than 50, about 50 years almost, is something that I've understood within myself, that I'm not tied to a result for making something that is called a painting. I'm not tied for a result. I mean, as in terms of succeeding in selling it and promoting it and all that. I'm not very good at it, but I sustain myself in spite of whatever might happen. I will continue to do what I do. So there is within my work what I look in other artists, this sense of honesty. So the people that are promoted, it doesn't necessarily mean because they sell their work that they're dishonest, but it creates a question in my mind that would a person who is extremely successful with their work, like the usual suspects, the Damien Hirsts and people that are populating the museums that look all the same all over the world nowadays. By the way, that's part of postmodernism, the homogeneity of culture across the planet, which is part of the agendas, all that kind of stuff. And that's a fact, that's a truth. Anyway, to be able to transmit any value that we have to each other is to make sure it comes from the center of honesty. And if you're wrong about something, which I am about different things, I don't necessarily have the facts about something. I'm attracted, I'm attached, I'm thinking about certain stories that have meaning to me, but they could also be fudged, they could be fabricated. But the thing that I'm attracted to is a fundamental notion of goodness within a story. It is a conundrum, as you can see. The truth junkie conundrum is a real issue, because as much as we would like to think something to be true because it makes sense in some way, it could also have been fudged. But I'm not deterred if I find out differently. I'm still attached to the notion that is presented behind it. So even people who are attempting to use their subterfuge to undermine me in their comments or in their presentations, I find myself encouraged by being attracted to the right story, even if it's not 100% factual or even no fact included. It still allows me to function somehow within a context of this feeling of honesty. I know I've talked about this before, but it seems to be ratcheting up, and people that are attached to notions of predicting things like the idea economically or environmentally and all the things that are being manipulated out there, which is a fact. Manipulation is at such a high level now, and I'm coming across people, analytic people that use gematria and the numbers, like Mr. Cat-Eye. I love this fellow, Mr. Cat-Eye, how he analyzes the numbers. There's another character that uses gematria. He kind of rambles on. I forget his name. He uses another version of the gematria calculator. So in my mind, what has occurred to me is that within our function, in a very long way, historically speaking, we have been subject to manipulation through a very complex, very likely not biologically based, a technologically based system that is capable of organizing our actions in such a way that is almost impossible to identify its source and also its relationships, which is why I appreciate the whole numerical side of things, but it stops short for me. It stops short. It's not something that I would attach myself to because I can't, for one thing, I can't verify it, but it does make a lot of sense, and I think it is based on in the case of Cat-Eye, I find the guy to be quite honest. His whole presentation, I may be wrong. The other fellow, I'll attach a link to the other fellow. I find him just to be a kind of a gold digger sort of feeling, the way he rattles through stuff. He makes sense, but at the same time, I have my misgivings about the way his delivery, the way he delivers the whole message that he's carrying about the truth out there and how gematria, his version. I left a comment actually. I've studied a little bit of Kabbalah. I spell it with a Q because I'm not attached to the K-A-B Bala kind of notion. There is interesting, the Q, which relates to Cain or Cain, the character that has been misrepresented biblically, terribly misrepresented biblically, and you can understand this by intuitively sensing these numbers in our lives, these letters and numbers which are the same. They express something that allow us to enter this mystery from an intuitive level, not from an analytic level, which is what this fellow is doing. I'm more attracted to the intuitive side of things, which is why I like this Mr. Cat-Eye. So the doubt that is being perpetrated on us, with a lot of truth involved, is the fundamental desire behind all this, the litanies of daily millions of posts of different things going on. It is fundamentally in place to create doubt. And I can live with uncertainty, but doubt is a killer. Doubt is a killer. So that's my thought today on Truth Junkies. Get to the core of your honesty, and you'll make a difference to my life.